He knows if you are sleeping. He knows if you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. While this makes jolly old St. Nick sound a little stalkery, that might not be the worst thing that the man in red has been up to. Sometimes it's Santa who ends up on the naughty list. Welcome to a very special Christmas episode of History is Criminal. I'm your host, Mick Biddick, and with me is the jingle to my bells, the unqualified and unapologetic Kimberly. This week we take a look at 4 stories of bad Santas over a span of almost 100 years. Kim, are you ready to jump back with the ghost of Christmas past?
Nothing says holiday cheer like exposing criminals in red suits and reminding everyone that ho, ho, ho is not illegal defense. Let's dig into the dirty past, Christmas past.
We can start our story with the Bishop Nicholas Amira. According to tradition, Nicholas, who would later become known as Saint Nick, became so enraged that he slapped a man named Arius during the Council of Nicaea in 325. It was at this council that the early church leaders were trying to hammer out some of the basic teachings of Christianity. Arius and his followers didn't view Jesus as divine. This was enough to push Nick over the edge, and according to tradition, he smacked the heretic across the face. This got our proto Santa locked up for the night. Luckily, the Virgin Mary appeared to him in his cell and freed him from his chains. When they checked in on Nick the next morning, he was out of his chains in what seemed to be a miracle. While historians debate if this story ever really happened, it's not Nick's only brush with crime. He seems to have used his miracle powers to solve the murder of 3 boys who were actually stuffed in a brine barrel when he located them. And for more details on that, you can go back to season one's episode St. Nicholas, aka the Real Bad Santa. So we can split hairs about whether or not the real Santa commits a couple million cases of breaking and entering every year. Then there's, of course, the aforementioned stalking. And let's not forget about the traffic laws. I mean, do speed limits mean nothing to this guy? I also have no idea whether or not OSHA has ever looked at the workshop, you know, and who knows if those elves are even paid. The SCPA might have some questions about the conditions for those flying reindeers. But before I get to slandering, go back before I slander. Go back before I slander
Before you make Santa Claus really mad,
any further and risk getting a stocking full of coal. Let's move on.
before you push your luck and wake up to a cease and desist from the North Pole, let's move on to the Santa who didn't just abuse the spirit of Christmas, but committed felonies in its name.
If Kris Kringle's questionable practice can be justified as being for the greater good, holiday spirit, and goodwill towards men, and all that, what about his helpers? Those who go out in his name to bring good cheer. Occasionally, some of them are really just looking to help themselves to others' Christmas presents. So, with the correct amount of holiday cheer, we take a look at some of the crimes committed by those trying to pass themselves off as the jolly old elf. We start in 2015 in Monterey, California, and Randy Lang. He walked into a Buffalo Wild Wings carrying a duffel bag. He told the staff and customers that he was Santa. Then he opened the duffel bag and pulled out bags of marijuana. He was in a giving mood and started sharing the wealth, as it were, with both staff and patrons.
That Santa Claus misunderstood the meaning of spreading cheer.
It's highly unlikely, no pun intended with the highly, that many of the recipients of his Christmas chronic were happy with the gift. He even went as far as to fill the tip jar with the green plant. Surely the busboys weren't complaining, but there was a Grinch in the mix, and before Santa could board his sleigh and return to the North Pole, the police showed up. And he told the police that he knew he was going to get arrested for this at some point. Apparently, it wasn't Lang's first attempt at playing Snoop Dogg Santa. And while this Santa was into giving, our next one was much more into receiving.
And just like that, Santa learned that goodwill does not, in fact, come with legal immunity.
Derbyshire, England had its own run in with a naughty Father Christmas in 2015. On the 15th of December, the drive through at the local KFC was robbed by a person dressed in the iconic red suit and hat of Santa. While his white beard was covered with a ski mask, it was unmistakably Santa. The saint in question squeezed through the restaurant's drive through window, calling into question the rumors of Santa having a bowl full of jelly sized tummy. Holding the employees at knife point, he emptied the cash drawers and then moved on to the safe. Our most likely counterfeit Santa then made his getaway. The Bobbies were left looking for a man wearing a red hat, red trousers, and a red jacket. Nearly any other time of the year, that would have been helpful, but it being just 10 days before Christmas, they found far too many St. Nick's, allowing the crooked Kris Kringle to get away.
Seasonal camouflage at its finest.
Another bad Santa comes to us from Great Yarmouth, England. In December of 2000, at an event called Santa Sails In, 35-year-old Santa's helper became involved in an argument with a teenager. Now, it's unclear who started this argument or even what the argument was about. Maybe the boy just didn't get that G.I. Joe with Kung Fu grip that he asked for last Christmas. No matter what the cause, the argument turned into a full on fist fight. Now, Santa fighting a teen is bad enough, but what made it worse is the small children who'd come to see Santa. Watching Kris Kringle kick the crap out of some pimply faced 15-year-old, by that time the police had arrived, many of the youngsters were in full on trauma hysterics. There was a second Santa on the scene that seemed to calm some of the children. However, with some unable to be soothed, someone had the great idea to take the children to the police station to see the fake Santa booked. While they claim that this helped the children cope, I have to wonder if seeing St. Nick perp walked really fostered that Christmas spirit.
Nothing says holiday magic quite like a core memory you'll have to unpack in therapy. And instead of letters to Santa, those kids were writing witness statements.
But maybe the most famous Santa bandit comes to us from 1927 Texas. Texans love to say that things are bigger and better in the Lone Star State. When it comes to bad Santas, well, Texas just might be right. The 1920s were the golden age of bank robbery, starting with the Gilded Age and running through the Great Depression. Bank robberies seemed to be challenging baseball as America's pastime. And on the 23rd of December, 1927, in Cisco, Texas, was about to get in on the action. Cisco, Texas is a small town of about 4,000 people located 60 miles west of Fort Worth, where Interstate 20 and Highway 183 converge. In 1927, Cisco was in the midst of the Texas oil boom, and the population set at about 12,500. Not only was Texas in the middle of an oil boom, but also in the middle of a bank robbing boom. According to the Texas State Historic Association, every 3 to 4 days, a bank was being robbed somewhere across the Lone Star State.
Oil money, small towns, and Christmas. That's just a combination waiting to be exploited.
Marshall Ratliff and his brother Lee had been pinched for a bank heist in Valera. The pair were each sentenced to 18 years, but walked away after only one. Two of the 3,995 pardons granted by Governor
Miriam.
Miriam A. Ferguson, aka Ma Ferguson. Ma was the first female governor of Texas and just 15 days short of being the first female governor of the United States, thanks to Nellie Ross of Wyoming. Ma had replaced her husband on the Democratic primary, her husband having been impeached during his second term. She ran on a somewhat reform platform with plans of cutting state expenditures, targeting the Ku Klux Klan, and opposing prohibition. She defeated a Klan supported prohibitionist candidate to win the Democratic nomination in 1924. And in 1920s Texas, it was a cakewalk to beat the Republican nominee. In that first term, she would win a second in 1932. Her time in office was embroiled in questionable actions, the typical political corruption, kickbacks, building contracts to friends and family, and an insane number of pardons. Those pardons were rumored to be for sale, much like everything during her administration. Two of those pardons went to Marshall and Lee.
The rumor mill was apparently very busy that year, and she wouldn't be the first or the last politician put on a naughty list.
While some might take this ill gotten second chance and try to make a go of it, not our boys. Marshall had planned a family affair, a reunion, if you will, but Lee was already back in prison for an unrelated crime. As a replacement, Marshall recruited Henry Helms, Robert Hill, whom he had met while in Huntsville prison. In addition, Lewis Davis was added to the crew, as their original safecracker had come down with the flu. Davis seems to have not been a regular on the bank robbing circuit. In fact, it seems he had never crossed the law before, but he was good with tools and down on his luck, needing a big payout. Marshall had his team, and their target would be a bank in his own hometown. The four held up in the town of Wichita Falls, Texas, 123 miles to the north. There, they rented a room and began to scheme for a way to relieve the National Bank of Cisco, Texas, of all that pesky money they were hoarding. With a plan in place, the quartet stole a car and headed to Marshall's hometown of Cisco.
Now that's holiday hustle at its finest. Stealing cars, scheming bank robbery. Sounds like someone missed the moment memo about peace on earth.
With a slew of bank robberies plaguing Texas, the Texas Bankers Association was at the end of their collective ropes. The association offered a reward of $5,000 to anybody who shot a bank robber during a robbery. This translates into about $85,000 in 2025. If nothing else, this would add an element of danger to the robbery. You can almost imagine, a bunch of local cowboys out of work, heavily armed, waiting across the street from the bank, just thinking, today's the day. After all, with a bank robbery every 3 to 4 days in Texas, it was bound to happen sooner or later. Marshall was worried that he would be instantly recognized walking into a bank in his hometown. To make sure he was safe, he had a plan. Before leaving Wichita Falls, he borrowed a Santa suit from Josephine Heron. Although some accounts give the name as Midge Tiller, the owner of the boarding house they had stayed in Wichita Falls. Marshall, dressed in the iconic red suit and hat, was dropped off a few blocks from the bank on the 23rd of December, 1927. Walking towards the bank, he was a red plaid Pied Piper, and a line of children followed. A Santa walking down the street drew little attention from adults, but he had to deal with the children. He answered questions, likely listening to Christmas wishes, and all the while knowing he had to get the kids to abandon him before he reached the bank. Somehow he managed to get the youngsters to leave him alone by the time the bank came into view.
He probably became the Grinch for a moment and scared them all away. I can just see it. All these children excited to be near Santa. Then, for some reason, he got them to go away. Yeah.
Now, sans children, Marshall stepped in the alley next to the bank and joined his accomplices. Nerves steadied, Marshall entered the bank first. Customers and employees alike called out, "Merry Christmas" to Santa, but St. Nick didn't return the greetings. With Santa standing in the bank, almost no people noticed seeing three other men enter the bank. Already inside the bank were four men: Alex Spears, Jewel Poe, bank employees, and customers: Marion Olson, Oscar Cleat. While four armed robbers would seem more than capable of dealing with four men in the bank, things quickly became more complicated when two fourth grade girls, Lorraine Cummer and Emma May Robinson, entered the lobby from a side room at almost the same moment. Miss B.P. Blassingame pulled into the bank by her 6-year-old daughter Frances, who wanted to see Santa.
Imagine that. Children wanting to see Santa. Probably not the best disguise to wear near Christmas time.
With all eyes on Santa, Davis, Hill, and Helms pulled out guns and shouted the very cliche, "Hands up!" With the trio covering the employees and customers, our nefarious, jolly old Santa started emptying cash drawers and then gained access to the vault. While the bandits' attention was focused on the four men, Miss Blassingame slipped out the bank's side door via the bookkeeping office. Blassingame fled the alley, calling out to everyone in earshot, "They're robbing the bank!" The police station was just 1 block away, and a frantic Miss Blassingame and 6-year-old Francis in tow made it to the office to alert Sheriff Pitt Bedford. Grabbing a riot gun, he called for officers Reddy's and Carmichael to join him. The chief took up a position at one end of the alley and the two officers at the other. They were quickly joined by numerous town folks looking for an easy $5,000.
Turns out civic duty paid better back then. $5,000 really brought out the community spirit.
Our Santa and his misguided elves realized that their getaway plan of slipping out the side door into the alley to their waiting car was no longer feasible. They also discovered that two more employees, Vance Littleton and Fred Strobel, hiding in the bookkeeping office. Why these two didn't get out when Miss Blassingame? I don't know. That's beyond me. Robert Hill, in a move that can only be called pure genius, saw someone move outside, so he shot through the window. This was answered by a hail of return gunfire. Then Hill, clearly the brains of the operation, fired a shot into the roof to, quote, let them know we're armed, because somehow a bullet through the window didn't seem to really have the effect. One of the bandits, most likely not Hill, concluded that the bank was surrounded. In this situation, the original escape plan was no longer a viable option. So they and 8 hostages, including 2 4th-grade girls, with an army outside of untrained Texan wannabe cowboys, each hoping to bag $5,000, the excrement was about to hit the rotary oscillator.
This is the exact moment where every bad decision meets, and there were too many guns, not enough sense.
So our Marshal Claus and his 3 felonious elves came up with a new plan. It turns out it wasn't the best plan, but hey, a plan's a plan. This strategy was based largely on the idea that the police and town folks would hold their fire with a human shield, especially one that included 2 small girls. It was the Scottish poet Robert Burns that said, "The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry." And these plans were all kinds of awry. Whether angry about the bank robbery, blinded by the promise of $5,000, the posse didn't seem to care about the human shield. As the hostages and robbers entered the alley from the bank's side door, bullets started to fly. Bank robbers were wounded, police were wounded, town folks were wounded, and hostages were wounded. It was the biggest of screw ups. Most of the hostages escaped at this time, except the 2 little girls. Chief Bedford was hit and would die a few hours later. Officer Carmichael died 2 weeks later. 6 civilians were also wounded. Marshall and Davis were hit as well. Davis was losing a great deal of blood.
That $5,000 came with a very high body count, and nobody won.
Nobody, yeah. The four,
Hilarious, wasn't that?
yes, the 4 robbers with their tiny hostages made it to their getaway car and sped for the edge of town, posse in hot pursuit. It was only then that our quartet of Mensa wannabes realized they were almost out of gas. It's unclear whether this is a result of a ruptured fuel tank or if they failed to fill up before leaving Wichita Falls. When it looked like their luck was about to change, they spotted the Harris family coming up to town to do some last minute Christmas shopping. 14-year-old Woodrow Wilson Harris was driving. The desperate gang of bandits stopped the Harris family with the plan of swapping cars. They loaded the loot and the now unconscious Davis into Harris's Oldsmobile just as the posse was arriving with flying bullets. Hill was now also hit, making 3 out of the 4 robbers wounded. Only then did the bandits realize that young Woodrow had taken the keys with him when he ran from the scene with his family.
That's smart.
Now, in full panic mode, Santa and his last two elves, along with the two little girls, piled back into the getaway car. In the chaos, they left Davis and all the loot in Harris's car. The posse recovered $12,400 in cash and $150,000 in non negotiable securities. It was the biggest bank heist in Texas history to that date, and they left it all behind.
Crime really is a terrible retirement strategy, especially when you forget the money.
Davis, the wounded officers, and the wounded townsfolk were all transported to the hospital. It was This was the only recorded instance of Davis ever running afoul of the law. He died 2 days later on Christmas. Six townsfolk also sat in the hospital, but in the craziest of the shootout, no one could say for sure if they were shot by vigilantes or shot by crooks. They lost count at 200 bullet holes in the bank.
That's a lot of bullet holes.
Taking the two tiny hostages, the three remaining crooks fled south, turned off on a dirt road before heading cross country. The car, shot to pieces, low on gas, died just a few miles out of town. Leaving their tiny hostages with the broken down car, they fled on foot. By late afternoon, Sheriff John Hart and deputies had sped to the side of the abandoned car, the press racing after them. The sheriff, the posse, and the press continued to hunt for the bandits until the search was called off with nightfall. The next morning, the three crooks stole another car and managed to crash that just outside of Putman. Then they carjacked, although no one would use that term for a few more decades, Carl Wiley. Not giving Wiley the chance to walk away with the keys, they forced him to chauffeur him around for the next 24 hours. So at least they were starting to learn, just not the right lessons. Wiley later reported the three were in bad shape, especially Marshall and Hill. Blood loss, lack of sleep, no food, and freezing rain had taken its toll. The next morning, the three of them came to the town of South Bend, where they planned to cross the Brazos River. In 2 days of running, they had covered a grand total of 52 miles. There, they were ambushed by the Young County Sheriff, and a running gun battle ended with a car crashing among the oil wells. Deputy Sheriff Cy Bradford, who would later join the Texas Rangers, jumped from his car while it was still moving, double barrel shotgun in hand. In his other hand, he held extra shells. As the three jumped from their crashed car, Bradford fired, dropping Marshal Santa Radcliffe. Quickly, Bradford replaced the spent shell and caught Hill with another blast. Hill dropped, but got back to his feet. Then a third blast temporarily dropped Helms as well.
I can just see all this in a action-packed Hollywood movie with Bruce Willis, and this just sounds like it was made up.
Yeah, it's just too, especially with him jumping. Car's still moving. He's jumping out, firing, reloading, and firing.
See, that's a classic Bruce Willis
Yeah,
movie
that's definitely, this is Die Hard Texas style.
in 1920s.
Yeah. Marshall was too damaged to go on. On his arrest, it was noted that he had at least 6 bullet wounds and was carrying 6 pistols. His running was over, but Helms and Hill made it to a nearby tree line. The two stayed on the run for 7 days, pushed to the brink by one of the largest manhunts in Texas history. They were finally caught on the 30th of December. Hill pleaded guilty to bank robbery and was sentenced to 99 years. He would escape from prison 3 times. Each time he was recaptured and brought back to prison. By the mid 1940s, he had settled down, became a model prisoner, and was pardoned. Reportedly, he changed his name, changed his ways, and went on to lead a productive life.
After all that, you probably learned your lesson, and you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. Helms was identified as the person who had shot Police Chief Bedford and Officer Carmichael. He tried for an insanity plea, but the court wasn't buying it. He died by electric chair on the 6th of September, 1929. Marshal Santa Radcliffe was convicted of armed robbery on the 27th of January, 1928, and sentenced to 99 years. Then, on the 30th of March, his sentence was changed to death because of his part in the killing of Bedford and Carmichael. This was despite the fact that no one could actually testify to having him fired a shot at all at the bank. When his appeal was denied, he also went for the insanity defense. On the day Helms' execution, Marshall started to act insane. In a short time, he had convinced his jail guards that he was suffering from some kind of mental illness. His mother was able to get what was called a lunacy hearing to determine if he was actually mentally ill. But before that hearing could take place, Judge Davenport of Eastland County issued an arrest warrant for armed robbery. This was where they had, this is in a different county where they had stolen the car. So it's a different robbery, and now they issue the arrest warrant for that robbery and had Marshall extradited to Eastland. In Eastland, Marshall again convinced his guards, Patrick Kilborn and Tom Jones, not the singer, that he was insane. The guards, forced to feed, bathe, and toilet him, were sure that he was no real threat. Then on the 18th of November, Marshall made a break for it. In the struggle, Jones was severely injured. As news spread of the attempted escape, the crowd gathered outside the jail, eventually reaching over 1,000 people. They demanded that Marshall be turned over, but Kilborn, loyal to his duty, despite the fact that he is one of the people that Marshall attacked, remained loyal to his duty and refused to turn over Marshall. The crowd would not be denied, and they broke into the jail and overpowered Kilborn.
Yeah,
Marshall,
Marshall's going to get in trouble here.
yeah, Marshall was dragged by his feet out in the street. There, the mob tossed a rope over a power pole and fixed the other end around Marshall's neck. The first attempt to hang him failed when the knot came undone. The second attempt, however, succeeded, and Marshall Santa Radcliffe was pronounced dead at 9:55 p.m. on the 19th of November, 1929.
As many people who like to watch hangings. So first he traumatizes children in the bank, and now he's going to traumatize children by his own hanging.
Yeah, yeah. People were really sick watching hangings back then. But in keeping with that sick tradition of lynching, thousands came to view Marshall's body, which was kept in a furniture store in Fort Worth, before a judge ordered the body to be locked up. His family was finally able to claim the body and had him buried in Fort Worth. The bank still stands on the same site, although a new modern building replaced it. Inside that bank, they display a painting of the robbery along with newspaper clippings, which to me just seems odd. Like, wow, remember that time we were robbed and all those people got shot? Let's paint that on our wall.
Yeah, that makes good sense.
Yeah. Marshall Ratliff was given the gift of a second chance by Governor Ma Ferguson. But like a greedy kid on Christmas morning, that wasn't enough. Like all the Santas we looked at today, he would find a lifelong place on the naughty list. After all, the real Santa's always watching, judging the naughty and the nice. And if that doesn't make you a little nervous, then maybe you have a permanent place on the nice list.
I do.
This has been a very merry History is Criminal. Come back next week when we look at Christmas crimes, past and present. Until then, if you like what you heard, tell a friend. And if not, tell an enemy. Never suffer alone.